to session 15. And in this session, we'll be watching John Maxwell speak again. And this time he'll be speaking for about 30 minutes. To get the most out of this session, you should record your thoughts on each of the 4 elements below in your workbook. After you watch him, we'll discuss those elements. Then, more homework. Oh yes, there's plenty of homework to do to become a great speaker. And if you're determined to become a great speaker, you're just getting started. And it's almost time for you to give your hero speech before moving past lesson 16. Now you might have already started this if your instructor got you started in the earlier sessions. Embrace it, dive into it, and surprise yourself over the next few weeks as you and your speech evolve. For now, get ready to watch John in action and be sure to take notes in your guide. And then we'll discuss those answers when we get back.
Connecting with people is as much an attitude about people as it is a skill in being able to connect with people. Because I can tell you, in my early years as a teacher, pastor, I did not understand this. Because I was a leader, I thought connecting was all about getting my people to connect with me. So if I could get them to buy into my vision, if I could get them to follow my leadership, and if I could get them to follow the flag I have as I'm waving it, so my concentration was always, I just wanted to get to them so that they could connect with me. And I was kind of like the guy in the cartoon. There is no I in team, but there is an M and an E, and that spells me. So let's get it right back where it needs to. I was at a Dayton conference, Positive Mental Attitude Rally in the 1970s. Changed my life. I listened to Zig Ziglar one day stand up and say to 10,000 people in the arena at Dayton, if you will help people get what they want, they will help you get what you want. And it was so clear that day that I was doing the opposite. I was trying to help people know what I want so that I could lead them, and all of a sudden I said, John, you've got this all turned around. You start concentrating on others and starting to help them to be successful, and then it comes back to you. And that changed my life. I love the story of a professor who, these people were working on their nursing degrees, RN degrees, and they were in for their final exam. And as they were taking their final exam, the last question on the exam was, what is the name of the cleaning lady that cleans our room? And some of the kids raised their hand and they said, the question we don't understand is this really going to count? And he said, of course it's going to count. It's going to count as much as all the other questions, because he said, you have to understand, you're not in the medical business, you're in the people business. And knowing the name of the cleaning lady is absolutely going to be very essential for you to be successful in your life. What was he saying? He was saying you need to value everyone. I just came back from China, and I had an interesting discussion in the green room with a very successful businessman. He was a billionaire, and he looked at me and he said, John, he said, what's the most important language in negotiation in the world? And of course I was in China, so I thought, well, Mandarin is, I'll throw it. And he kind of smiled, and he said, I thought you'd say English. I said, well, I really did think English, but I wanted to be nice to you. And I said, man, he said, neither. He laughed, he said, neither. I said, well, what is? He said, my customer's language. Whatever their language is, that's the most important language in business and negotiation. I was in New York City in November doing a wonderful leadership event that I do every year called Exchange, and giving leaders leadership experiences. And one of my favorite people, Linda Kaplan-Taylor, came in and spoke for 2 hours. And I'm here to tell you, the people that were there, who spent a lot of money to be there, unanimously said that if they would have just heard the 2 hours of hers, it was worth the whole deal. This gal is the marketing genius of the world. I mean, she owns the marketing world, and I've known her for a few years, and she's so genuine, she's so wonderful. She's the gal, her company's the people that put the Duck Aflac on the map. You do understand. Dan Amos, who I know because I work with Aflac, the president of Aflac, you do know that he came to her and their team and he said, one of the frustrating things about being the president of this company is that nobody, not even my friends, know what it is. And they keep saying, now, what is the name of your company? What is the name of your company? And he said, you gotta help us get it till people will know our name and help us. And so she went back with her group, and in creative work, they were going around, and one person all of a sudden sounded like a duck, going, Aflac, Aflac, and everybody said, that's it, and it just caught on. Now, I want you to understand, today, it's number 5 as far as recognized name of a company in the world. Number 5. All because of that stupid duck. And for 2 hours, she held these business guys spellbound about how do you know how to connect with people and how do you know how to market with people. And one of the quick stories she told me later, because I went up and she has her offices over Central Park, and I went up and spent about another hour and a half after the conference was over on a couple things I want to talk to her about, books and things that I was kind of interested in. And she said, John, she said, I had a 10-minute interview with Warren Buffett, and they were very clear, you get 10 minutes with this guy. And so she said, I studied up all about him. And she said, as I read everything I could on him, she said, I spent 2 or 3 days in preparation for my 10-minute interview. She said, I found out that he liked cherry Coke. And of course, he has stock in Coca-Cola, and then she laughed, she said, he's made over $11 million on Coca-Cola stock, so I suppose you'd drink something Coca-Cola, wouldn't you? Okay. So she came into the interview, and again, they said, you have 10 minutes with him. So she sat down at the table with him, and she handed him a cherry Coke. And she said, I know I only have 10 minutes with you, Mr. Buffett, but I thought we would start with your favorite beverage. And he just popped that can and looked at her and he said, young lady, you can have as much time as you want. He said, nobody has ever started an interview with my favorite beverage, and she had an hour and a half with him. What was she doing? What was she doing? She understood that connecting is all about others. Let me just say this final statement before I take you to number 3. Anyone that is self-consumed, anyone that is absolutely doing their best to either look good themselves or pull off themselves to make themselves look better will never connect with people. Let me tell you something. To connect with people, you have to forget yourself. You have to forget yourself in conversation. You have to forget yourself in speaking. Many people are never natural in speaking because they have never learned how to forget themselves. They've never learned how to free themselves up with others because they have not yet had the primacy goal of connecting with them more than anything else. John Kotter has written a lot of books. I'm sure you've read him. He's out of Harvard. In fact, he called me on this book, A Sense of Urgency, that I have in your paragraph. And he wanted me to read the manuscript before it came out, and he wanted to talk to me about a couple things. And it was in reading the manuscript that I came across this paragraph, and I thought, oh, how powerful. Here we go. In it, John Kotter states, for centuries we have heard the expression, great leaders win over the hearts and minds of others. Note that he doesn't say that great leaders win over the minds of others, nor does he say they win over the minds and hearts. The heart comes first. And if we desire to be a good communicator, we need always to keep that in mind. If you want to win over another person, first win his heart, and the rest of him is likely to follow. Isn't that beautiful? The heart and the mind. Go for the heart first. Back to I was just in China again a couple of weeks ago, and every day as I was working with the business people of China, I would have a lunch with a different company. And I was having lunch this day with the owners of the 5th largest automobile manufacturing company plants in China. Over 10,000 people work for them. And so we were having a wonderful conversation, and Helen, which was her American name, the wife of this billionaire guy, she said, do you mind if she was sitting like a couple seats from me, she said, do you mind if I tell you why we like you over here? And I said, well, I'd like to know. And she said, we can tell when you teach us that you're our friend. And she said, we can tell when you teach us that you want to help us. And when you're teaching, you'll stay on an issue or a point until you really know that we've got it. But she said, it's the friendship. It's the friendship. Communication and connecting is so much beyond words. And I've heard those who are so good at communicating with words and phraseology, and they never connect. And it's because they're leaving out the large percentage of connection. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. It's the attitude. That's why I say to you, connecting is a skill to learn, but it's also an attitude to possess. Okay. In fact, just take a moment, and this is an exercise we don't take much time to do because we're taping the lesson, but just take for a moment. Think of the first 2 or 3 top communicators, the ones, your favorite ones. Just think of them just for a moment. Just get in mind the picture of somebody that you really like to hear communicate, or either one-on-one or in a group. Doesn't matter. Okay. Now, whoever that person is, let me tell you what I know about that person without you telling me who that person is. Whoever that person is that you like and think is a good communicator, can I tell you something? I will bet you they put a lot of energy in their communication. Because it takes a lot of energy to connect with people. Listen, it doesn't take a lot of energy to say something, but it does take a lot of energy to move someone. Did you get the difference? It takes no energy to get up and say something. I mean, I can get up here and I can just talk. But if I'm going to affect you, if I'm going to connect with you, if I'm going to move you, it takes a lot of energy. And what you'll never find is you will never find great communicators that are low on energy. Because the connecting requires that I come to you, not that you come to me. Low energy people, they require you come to them. Low energy people basically says, I'm here, I have something to teach you, come around me, come around me. Connectors understand that's not how you do it at all. You have to go to them. You have to have the energy, and it takes a lot. So let me give you an illustration of energy. Quite a few years ago now, my first church where I pastored was in southern Indiana, Hillham. You've heard me talk about it, so I don't need to go there now. But it was just a little country church, and I loved it. And while I was there, we relocated, and we built a new church on a hill with 3 acres. Okay, so it was a nice country church in the country. Well, 25 years later, they wanted to have a 25th year reunion. Now, I'm long gone. In fact, now I'm in San Diego, and I'm speaking for Promise Keepers, and I'm writing books. And they wanted me to come back, but I could tell when they called me, they were a little bit intimidated, and, you know, would you come back? And I said, I'd love to come back. And then they wanted to know how much it would cost, you know, I mean, we're doing the whole deal. I said, it won't cost you anything. I'll pay the expenses. I want to bring my kids. I want to show them where they weren't born then. I said, I'll just come back. And so we set the date for the 25th anniversary for the new building to come back. And I remember hanging up the phone and Margaret looking at me and saying, John, this is going to be a challenge. Those people haven't grown for 25 years. Those people are still having the same conversations with the same people at the same tables. And you're like a rocket. She says, I'm going to watch this. This will be very interesting. How are you going to connect with those people? And I thought, it's got a point. So I began to say, okay, what am I going to do? How am I going to go back to Hillham, Indiana with these precious, wonderful farmers and connect? So I worked hard on it. And I'm going to just kind of give you the points real quickly and kind of share the story, and hopefully it'll all make sense to you, because these are the things I did to make sure I connected with those people when I'm back. Number one, I searched for memorabilia of our time together. I went back to the old pictures. I went back through the old sermons I'd preached. Anything that I had done there that I had kept and filed and collected, I searched and I began to pile it in a group. So that when I went back, I would have the pictures, and I'd say, hey, remember this one? And I'd show them the picture of 301 people out in front of an old country church building. Do you remember that day? Because that was the record attendance day that I knew that they still remembered, and I also knew that was still the record attendance. I worked, number two, on remembering their names. Now, when I left, there weren't that many names to remember, but it had been 25 years. So how am I going to know them today? Well, I called Ken Jackson, who I had the privilege of sharing my faith with, and who now was an elder in that congregation. And I said, Ken, have you had a directory of your church lately? He said, yeah, last year we did a directory. And I said, you meet me in West Baden when I get into town, meet me across in the parking lot, across from, told him the store, and I said, bring that directory with you. He brought the directory, and I sat in the car for 30 minutes. And I went through all those faces, 25-year-old older faces, and I got all the names. So that when I arrived, I remembered every name. Number 3, I tried to make them feel special. I thought, I've got to do something to the people that were with me then, because of course congregations changed. Not a lot of people that were with me back then wouldn't be there now, and vice versa. And I said, so I said, I will come to the church and speak on Sunday if you'll let me come in a day early. And I would like to have a Saturday meeting. Now, when I say meeting, not a church service, I would like to let's have dinner together, and I only want the people to come that were there when I was there. I don't want any strangers. I don't want any new people. I just want the people that were there when I was there, so that it can just be us. In other words, I was having a holy huddle. You know what I'm talking about? Just us 4 and no more. And I said, remember, members only. Don't let anybody in. Don't let it. Oh my goodness, when I came on that Saturday night for dinner, those people, just those people, that handful of people, I mean, I'm saying a handful of people, there could have been over 55, 60 people there in that process. But I am telling you, they had their cameras ready, and I mean, we took more pictures than 55 people have ever taken in their life. Number 4, I made my visit personal for as many people as possible. I went back through my records, and if I had a baptism certificate of somebody I baptized, I brought it with me. So I said, hey, Ab, by the way, you remember when I baptized you out in the pond? And he did remember that because it was my first baptism. I didn't know anything about baptism. Nobody told me I was supposed to hold on to the person when I put him under. I mean, I didn't know, holding my wrist. I had no clue. I mean, after all, I just graduated with honors from college that prepared me for the ministry, and why would they ever teach me how to do anything practical, helpful, and life-changing? And so literally, when I put Ab down in that, and it was a farm pond. I mean, you got to get the picture, okay? We're in Hillham. It was a farm, and when I put Ab, he was the stiffest board. When I put him down, he just floated away from me, and I can still remember, I grabbed him by his knees and pulled him back, and so it was, then I wasn't sure he was completely down, so then I pushed him down, and, about drowned the guy, you know what I'm talking about. Hey, Ab, I've got the baptism certificate, or almost your death certificate when you drown. Hey, Shirley Crowder, I want to give you this sermon. What's this, Pastor? This is a sermon I preached when you gave your heart to Christ. And I started passing out personal memorabilia to those people, and they just began to weep openly. And I looked over in the corner where Margaret was, and I smiled real big. Do you think I'm connecting, sweetheart? Do you think I've got them here yet, huh? Number 5, I made an effort to spend extra time with the people on Sunday. In fact, I said, well, let's go to church early, so when they come into church, I'll be there to shake their hands and meet the new people. So we went 30 minutes early. Hey, the parking lot was already full, and the place was packed. They were already there. I mean, they were already there. And so I remember I literally went pew by pew, because I had 30 minutes before the service, and I shook everyone's hand, met all the people. After the service, stayed until the last person until the pastor said, okay, we can lock the door, Number 6, during the sermon, I shared my mistakes. I talked to them very candidly about this was my first church and all the things that I had done that were not good. And they laughed because they remembered some of the things that I had done. And I went through the whole process. And then the last thing, because there are other things, but the last one I'll share here, is I acknowledged them as part of my success. And so I shared with them all, I was a kid, I was just out of college, I didn't know much, this is where I was. And then I looked at them, and in my sermon, I said to them, when a person graduates from seminary, it ought to be a requirement they have to come and spend a year at Hillham because of all the things you taught me and what I learned from you. And it was the most wonderful, precious day. And we're back on the plane with the kids. We're going back to San Diego. And Margaret was holding my hand, and she said, John, you connected. But do you see how much energy I put into connecting? Do you see, can I tell you something? Most people, they walk into the room and have not given a thought when they walk into the room, the things they have to have already done to be able to get on a soul-to-soul, heart-to-heart connection with people. And then they wonder after they walk out of the room why there was no connection. I got to tell you one quick story. It's not in the notes, it's not in the book, but I got to tell you because it's just, you have to. They wanted, when I went to the church, they wanted to know if they could video record the sermon, the message. I said, well, sure. In fact, the service was going to start at 10 o'clock, and they told me how it was going to be. They said, we're going to have one song, take up the offering, and then we want you to preach for 2 hours. And I said, well, you don't want me to preach for 2 hours, and they said, no, we're cutting everything else out, one song, one offering. And they said, can we video you? I said, well, of course you can video, that's no problem. So I'm sitting there on the platform, and they're getting ready for the deal, and I look on the front row, and there's this guy with this huge, honking camera. And I thought to myself, is he the one that's going to video me? There? I mean, I kind of thought of a tripod. I mean, I kind of thought of things maybe in a little inconspicuous kind of position. And when I got up to speak, he got up. And he came right there. And for an hour and 15 minutes, he just followed me all around. He's just right there. They got the close-up video. And I am just, I mean, inside, of course, to me, I've done so much communication, everything's funny to me anymore. You know what I'm saying? And I'm just cracking up, and I'm thinking, I didn't have this in mind when I said you could video me. You understand? But it was just it was a wonderful experience, and we connected. I've spoken many times for Walmart. I've been many times at their headquarters in Bentonville. And I remember the first time I went there, I went in there an hour early just to go through their offices and through the areas where they do a lot of their work in manufacturing, just to read the slogans, because Walmart's just loaded with quotes and slogans and the whole deal. And as I was walking through, the first time I was walking through the Walmart headquarters, I came across the 10-foot rule. And I remember stopping, and the 10-foot rule basically says that if you're an employee of Walmart and somebody walks within 10 feet of you, you go up and say hi to them, you go up and shake their hand, you go up and ask them if you can do anything for them. The 10-foot rule basically said you always look for people and take the initiative to talk to them, contact them, offer to help them. And I thought, my goodness, churches could grow if they just had the 10-foot rule. I mean, forget God. Just have a 10-foot rule and you'll get growth. People will come, then you tell them about God. But the 10-foot rule, the initiative, the ability to just to go first. In fact, I can still remember going to Japan in one of my first trips, and my daughter, who was about 12 years old, was with me, and Margaret, and I was going through a translator in Japan, and Elizabeth looked at Margaret and says, boy, Daddy is boring, isn't he? He's just boring. Well, I was. And I had to learn how to be patient. One of the things I had to do is when I traveled internationally, I had to learn that my teaching wasn't expressing my point. My teaching was them understanding my point, which meant that I had to come back and circle the wagon sometimes 6, 8 times to make sure that they understood what I was trying to convey, which meant that I would have to ask them questions and say, now, talk to me. Are you familiar with this? Is this something that you would understand? If not, help me out, translator. What was something they would understand? Just patience. It takes a lot of patience to be a good connector. Connecting is more skill than natural talent. I think this is maybe one of the most encouraging parts of the book and one of the most encouraging parts of the teaching. That I do believe, without any question, that connecting is more skill than natural talent. And Emerson said it well, all great speakers were bad speakers first. Isn't that good? And let me tell you something. If you don't agree with that statement, you're on drugs. If you think that you started off good, you absolutely have been listening to your mother way too long. Trust me on this, because you didn't. And let me just, I got to tell you the story, because I'm known for communication. I'm known for connecting. I'm in college, and my friend Don Crooks is going to do his first sermon. And I go to the church to encourage him, sit right on the front row. And I'm there to encourage him because the next week I'm doing my first sermon in another church. And I can tell you, he got up to speak, and I can promise you, you think of the worst speaking you ever heard, and then whatever that is, go down. I mean, it was awful. He only spoke for 3 minutes. The only great thing about it was a 3-minute message. And the problem with it is it was 2 minutes too long. Because he got up and he was all nervous and he was just sweating. He was just sweating, and he had a handkerchief, and he would start to say something, and he would forget what he was wanting to say, and he'd look and he'd say, Lord help me, Lord help me, Lord help me. And he'd wipe sweat. And then he'd make another statement, he'd forget, he'd lose his way. Oh, Lord help me, help me, Jesus, help me. Oh, Lord help me. And then he'd say another statement. And of course, I mean, it's terrible. I mean, and by the end of the first minute, I'm on the front row, and I'm saying, oh, Lord help me, Lord help me, Lord. And all the people are, Lord help me. Oh, Lord help me. I mean, we're all, Lord help me, help me. And by the second minute, it changed. Oh, Lord help us. Dear God, help us. Help us, Lord. Help us, help us, help us. 3 minutes, it's over. And then we get in the car, and I thought, I am an encouraging person. I'm one that likes to add value, encourage you. This is beyond my capacity. There is nothing I can say with any kind of authenticity or credibility that can encourage this man. And so I said, Don, I said, look, it was your first time. I know it'll get better, but you really have helped me about my first message. And he said, what's that? I said, I'm not going to say, Lord help me, and I'm going to go more than 3 minutes. And that was my goal. My goal was to go more than 3 minutes. Honestly, that was, I mean, you say, was your goal to help people? Not at all. Was your goal to lead anybody to God? No, not at all. That was not even on my chart. That was way beyond. That was a wish list that could never enter into my arena. I had one goal: speak longer than 3 minutes. So the rest of that week, you know what I did? I prepared an outline that would help me speak longer than 3 minutes. I'll give you the outline. The first point was sin, what sin does to people. The second point was conviction, how God speaks to people's heart. The third point was salvation, what happens when a person comes to God. The fourth point was the Holy Spirit and how He works in your life. The fifth point was prayer. The sixth point was Bible study. The seventh point was witnessing. Are you getting the picture? My goal is to go longer than 3 minutes. I basically should have got up and said, I would like to talk to you about the world and all that is within it. And when I finished, I felt proud because I knew it was longer than 3 minutes. I didn't know how long it was. I'm getting back in the car. Margaret and I are engaged. She went to be with me for my first sermon. She's not saying one thing. That should have been the hint right there, you know. Now that after being married, you understand that silence is not golden. You understand that, don't you? Silence is not gold. And she's not saying one thing to me. And so finally, you know, I got to go. I got to ask. And I said, hey, honey, I said, how'd it do? And she looked over and she said, well, John, you accomplished your goal. I said, you mean I went longer than 3 minutes? Yes. She said, I did. I said, well, honey, how long did I go? She said, 55 minutes. Can you imagine those people? I'm surprised they didn't shoot themselves. I went back to that same place about 2 years later, and I got up, and the first thing I did is said, I apologize. First of all, I know that none of you were here the first time. Because if you're here the first time, you wouldn't be here today. So I'm apologizing, not because you were here, because you would have had more sense than to come and hear me the second time, but I'm apologizing so that if you know the people that were here the first time, that you would go tell them that it's a little better now. Now, I say that, I just say that because when we think of connecting and communicating, we just think, well, you know, I don't know if I have the gifts and talent. And I'm just saying to you, I was hopeless fact, I can tell you, I don't feel I really learned to connect until after about 8 to 9 years of me speaking. It took me that long to really understand rhythm and just the proper feel that you have to do to be able to connect well with people. Okay.
Okay, let's discuss your thoughts about John's presentation. You'll need to stop this video after each of the 4 questions and answer in your own words before moving on to the next. If you're in a group, discuss each of your responses before moving on. The first question is, how did John build rapport? Stop here and write out your answer. Remember, if you're in a group, discuss your answers among yourselves. Second question, how did John establish credibility? And again, write out your thoughts and discuss before moving on. Third question, how did John use humor and how effective was it for you? Now meet me back here for the last question. The last question is, what was John's powerful point? After you've reflected and discussed your answers, meet me back here and we'll discuss your homework. Now about your homework. Before we move past lesson 16, you'll need to be prepared to share your personal hero story. The entire session will be dedicated to observation and critiquing of one another's speeches. If you're doing this online, record a video and send it to our team, and we will review it and give you feedback either by email or over the phone. The important part is to take notes of the constructive criticism and to highlight your strong points. In this observation session, we'll be looking for 3 main components: rapport, credibility, and relevancy, all of which should reveal your powerful point, moral, or your lesson. Relax, have fun, just practice, practice, and practice, and be ready to grow. Now, you might be nervous about this and it may seem uncomfortable, especially if this is your first time. But remember, this is totally natural. Take a deep breath and go for it. If possible, keep a copy of this first video for yourself so you can compare it to the final video at the end of the course. You'll be amazed at how much you've improved. This will keep you motivated to keep moving. Remember, this speech doesn't have to be good. It will get better as you go, I promise. So don't get too nervous or hung up. This is just practice. And if this is your first time presenting, I assure you, we all felt like you do right now. And again, I can't emphasize enough that the nervous feeling is totally natural, but it will change with practice, repetition, and making the right adjustments as you continue to learn. Now, are you ready? I'll see you on stage for lesson 16.